Hi, this is Adam Strauss, portfolio manager with Pekin Hardy Strauss Wealth Management. I'm here with my fellow portfolio manager and partner, Matt Bloom. Matt recently published an update to his Navigator on the importance of IRAs, and we're here to talk about IRAs for a few minutes. The title of your piece, Matt, is The Vital Importance of IRAs. So I guess that leads me to my first question. Why are IRAs important for somebody who's planning their retirement?
Great question. It's because it's an opportunity to shelter assets from taxes, or at least to defer those taxes far into the future. You know, a lot of folks don't have a lot of tax breaks, but IRAs do provide one way that pretty much anyone can reduce the impact of taxes on their investments. So, you know, we look for every opportunity to increase tax efficiency, and IRAs are one of those ways.
Right. So if I have money in a taxable account and money in an IRA account, I'm better off having a little bit more money in a retirement account because those assets can grow without gains being taxed along the way. Or at least deferred.
Exactly. Yeah, because you don't have to pay. It allows you to make, you know, investment decisions without taxes being a part of that consideration, right? If you can sell something for a gain and not have to worry about that. You can have an income producing asset and not have to pay taxes on that income in that year, right? It depending on the type of IRA, it's either deferred into the future when you take that money out in retirement, or if it's a Roth IRA, then those gains are never taxed.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about some of the different types of IRAs? There's so many different acronyms out there, and I think it can get confusing. Can you just sort of frame it all for us?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a traditional IRA, the sort of most basic type of IRA, and that's simply a tax deferred account, where the assets that are inside that account can grow over time, and you are not responsible for paying any taxes each year until you are in retirement. You're beyond age 59 and a half. That's when the government will allow you to withdraw that money penalty free. But at that time, you would be responsible for the taxation. So you would pay ordinary income tax on the withdrawals from that traditional IRA. The other common type is the Roth IRA, and that's an IRA where you make contributions with after-tax dollars. So you've already paid the taxes on the income. You put the money into a Roth IRA, and then that Roth IRA, you know, theoretically grows far into the future. And then when you take the money out, you actually don't owe any taxes whatsoever. So Roth IRAs are really powerful because you could have it grow for, you know, 30, 40 years. And then once you're beyond age 59 and a half, the same rule applies. You can take that money out and you don't pay any taxes on it whatsoever.
Before you get on to some of the other categories of IRAs, I want to just ask, because I've heard a lot about the traditional and the Roth IRA. How does one decide when they're making a contribution, whether they should make a contribution to the traditional IRA where the taxes are deferred, or a Roth IRA where you pay the tax up front and then it's tax free? Which one is better?
Yeah, so that's a really that's a question that doesn't have a definitive answer because it depends on the person's financial and tax situation. So first of all, not everyone can make a contribution directly to a Roth IRA. There are income limits that the IRS has in place. So basically, if you earn above a certain amount of money, you are not allowed to make a contribution directly to a Roth IRA. There are ways to get that money in there, which I can discuss in a minute, which are fully approved by the IRS. For a traditional, you may want to do the traditional in order to shelter some of those taxes, right? If you don't want to pay income taxes on that, you can actually deduct that contribution from your taxes. So that depends upon, do you have access to a retirement plan from your employer? what is your income? Because so basically the government has some rules in place where if you have access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan, then you may not be able to make a deductible IRA contribution to a traditional IRA. Or even if you don't have access to a retirement plan at work, if you earn above a certain amount of money, you may not be able to deduct your contribution. It's very individualized. So in those cases, it may, like, let's say I'm somebody who cannot make a deductible IRA contribution to a traditional IRA. Well, what I can do is I can make an after-tax contribution to a traditional IRA, and then I can convert that to a Roth IRA. In general, anyone who has to make an after-tax contribution to an IRA because they make too much money, you're always going to be better off than trying to get that money into your Roth IRA, because it's after-tax money either way. If you're making an after-tax contribution, then ultimately you'd like to have that money in the Roth, because then that growth down the line doesn't get taxed either. So anyway, I know that it's a complicated question. It's dependent heavily on a person's income, their access to retirement plans at work. Then, I mean, also, like expectations for tax rates down the line, right? Things like that. It's a really nuanced question that does depend upon a person's personal financial situation.
So I can contribute to an IRA account every year, even if I have a 401k at work?
That's right. Yeah, those two are completely independent of each other. So you can always make an IRA contribution, even if you have a 401k or other type of retirement plan at work, but your ability to deduct that contribution can be impacted by having an employer-sponsored plan.
And what are some of the limits that I have? I mean, how much can I contribute to my IRA every year?
So in tax year 2022, which has just finished up, but you can still make that contribution up to the tax filing deadline in April, you are limited to $6,000 per person, with an additional $1,000 catch-up contribution if you're over age 50. So you could contribute up to $7,000. In 2023, if you're making a calendar year 23 contribution to your IRA, the IRS increased it by $500, so it's $6,500 now, or $7,500 if you're over age 50.
Okay. What are the circumstances where you would recommend against making a contribution to an IRA account?
Wow, that's a tough question. I can't think of very many situations. I guess if you simply don't have the the cash flow to allow for it, would be one situation. But in general, it's tough to think of a scenario where you would not want to have that money in a tax advantaged vehicle, because it's really, you're not spending the money, you're simply taking the money from one pocket and putting it into a tax advantaged pocket. So in general, it's always going to be better to have money in a tax advantaged investment vehicle versus one that gets taxed every year.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I thought of is if I'm in a situation where perhaps I don't have a lot of cash around, and I'm, like maybe I'm about to buy a house and I need to put a big down payment, right, and I just, I need every single dollar that I can. Then even if it's a good idea to make a contribution, better not to make a contribution than not have the cash that you need for some particular investment, yeah, or expenditure.
Yeah, cash flow is really the one scenario where it may not make sense, because obviously you don't want to be in a position where you have to go and take that money back out, because there can be penalties associated with that. So you don't want to find yourself in that position. So if you think that you're going to have a need for every dollar for whatever reason, then you don't want to necessarily put it into an IRA and then have to pull it back out. But aside from that, there's really not a lot of situations where it's going to be advantageous to have the money in a taxable account versus an IRA.
Right. I mean, you have a chart in your Navigator, which is just eye-opening in terms of how the same amount of money can grow in an IRA versus a taxable account. And I mean, it just looks like your long-term results are so much better.
Yeah.
If you can have as much money as you can put into that retirement account, just because of the tax advantages.
Yeah.
I interrupted you a little while back. You were talking about the different types of IRAs. You got through the IRA, you got through the Roth IRA. What are some of the other perhaps lesser used IRAs that are out there that people might be able to use?
Sure. Yeah. So the two other big ones are the SEP, which is a simplified employee pension plan, the SEP IRA, and then the simple IRA. And these are so the SEP is primarily used by people who are self-employed. It allows for much higher contributions, right? Because they're not necessarily part of a 401k plan or something like that if they're self-employed. And so it's another form of IRA that's used by entrepreneurs and self-employed folks. And then the simple IRA is it's basically an employer plan, but for small businesses, typically with 100 or fewer employees. And that one has, again, higher contribution limits than a normal traditional or Roth IRA. So those are used for more of the more like employer plans, but they're still IRAs. So they're still they're simpler than the 401k or pension plans, things like that. They allow for small businesses or sole proprietors to make larger contributions than the standard 6,000 or 6,500 without having to do the complex filings that are required for like 401ks.
So it sounds to me like if I'm just an employee where I get a W-2 every year, I'm looking at the traditional IRA and the Roth IRA.
Right.
But if if I've got a business of my own of some sort, even if it's just a sole proprietorship or whatever, then there are some other options for me to think about, like the SEP IRA or the simple IRA.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, great. What else should we know about IRAs that we haven't discussed?
Well, we've covered the most important stuff. I guess what I would say is that there are a lot of complex little rules that are in place. I mentioned like the income requirements for deductibility and for making direct Roth contributions. It's really intricate, and the IRS has all these limits in place, and they change every year. They adjust these limits every year. So it's important to look at that to understand what your personal situation is going to be. We have some helpful tables in the Navigator. They lay out what all those contribution limits are and deductibility limits and things like that. So it's important to look at that. Just know that there are all these little rules in place, and understand those when you're trying to figure out what's the best vehicle for you.
Probably also, if you're not sure exactly what you can do and can't do, to ask your tax accountant.
Absolutely.
So that they can guide you and advise you on what you're able to do without running afoul of any of the IRS's rules.
Absolutely right. Yeah, always talk this through with your accountant when you're trying to figure this out, because they're going to be able to provide that helpful advice on that, and they know your tax situation best.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I learned a lot about IRAs today, Matt. Appreciate your time and your expertise, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Adam.